She screamed my name only once. It wasn't loud enough for the guests gathered in the backyard to understand what they were hearing. Music from the birthday party swallowed most of it. Laughter covered the rest. But I knew my daughter's voice better than I knew my own heartbeat. By the time I reached the hallway, the bedroom door had already clicked shut. I grabbed the handle. Locked. I knocked once. No answer. Then came another cry. Mom, please. The sound froze every thought in my mind. I slammed my shoulder against the door. It opened just enough for me to see my 12-year-old daughter standing in front of a vanity mirror, tears pouring down her face as thick strands of her chestnut hair covered the floor around her like fallen leaves. My younger sister smiled. "It's only hair," she said. Those 3 words destroyed what little remained of our family. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I didn't even look at the 20 people filling the backyard who had heard enough to know something terrible had happened, yet chose to keep eating birthday cake instead. I simply wrapped my daughter in my arms, carried her out of that house, and drove away. What none of them realized, not my sister, not my mother, not the guests pretending they had seen nothing, was that someone had captured everything. By sunrise, the people who had humiliated my daughter would be standing outside my front door, begging for a chance to explain. By then, it would already be too late. My name is Grace Bennett. I'm 37 years old. If you've ever felt like the forgotten child in your own family, this story is for you. Looking back now, I realize our family didn't collapse that Saturday afternoon. It had been falling apart for more than 20 years. The birthday party was simply the moment the cracks finally became impossible to hide. I own a small bookstore called Willow and Pine on the edge of Cedar Ridge, a quiet town where everyone knows each other's business before breakfast. It's the kind of place where customers stop for coffee, stay for conversation, and sometimes leave carrying more hope than books. I opened the shop 5 years earlier with money my husband and I had saved for a larger home. Instead of buying a bigger house, we built something that became our second home. I never regretted that decision. Not even after Daniel died. Daniel Bennett had been a firefighter. He believed every person deserved one place in the world where they felt safe. When we designed the bookstore together, he insisted there should be oversized chairs by the windows. "Someone will need them someday," he'd say. "They'll come in pretending they just want a novel. But really, they'll need somewhere to breathe." He was right. After the accident, those chairs became my sanctuary. Daniel never made it home from a warehouse fire 4 years ago. A collapsing roof ended his shift and our future in less than 10 seconds. One moment I was making dinner. The next, 2 firefighters stood on my porch without speaking. I understood before either of them removed his helmet. Our daughter understood even less. Emma was 8. She waited by the living room window every evening for almost 6 months, convinced her father had simply gotten lost. Children have a heartbreaking way of believing impossible things because reality hurts too much. She's 12 now. She still keeps one of Daniel's old hoodies folded neatly beneath her pillow. Whenever life becomes overwhelming, she sleeps holding one sleeve. She says it still smells like him. I never tell her that I secretly spray a little of his favorite cedar cologne on it every few months. Some comforts are too precious to outgrow. Emma inherited Daniel's artistic talent. Every bookmark displayed inside Willow and Pine was illustrated by her. Every handwritten quote hanging from the shelves was traced by her careful hands. Customers often bought books they hadn't planned to purchase, simply because they wanted to support the little artist. She never spent the money. Instead, she tucked every dollar into a weathered wooden box painted with tiny wildflowers. Whenever I asked what she was saving for, she'd smile. "It's a surprise." She never said another word. I respected that. Hope sometimes needs privacy. Unlike my mother, Margaret Collins had opinions about everything. She believed success could only be measured by salaries, promotions, and expensive neighborhoods. To her, my bookstore wasn't a business. It was a hobby that had somehow lasted too long. Whenever relatives asked about my work, she'd answer before I could. Grace sells books. The way she said it always sounded as though I spent my afternoons arranging pebbles by the roadside. My younger sister, Lauren, never corrected her. She rarely corrected our mother about anything. Lauren had always been the favorite. Some families deny favoritism exists. Mine celebrated it. My earliest memory of understanding this came when I was 7. Lauren broke our grandmother's crystal vase while chasing the dog through the house. Our mother hugged her. Accidents happen. 2 weeks later, I spilled orange juice on the dining table. I spent the afternoon scrubbing floors as punishment. It wasn't about the vase or the juice. It was about expectations. Lauren was expected to shine. I was expected to understand. That pattern followed us into adulthood. Lauren earned praise for trying. I earned criticism even when I succeeded. Daniel noticed it during our first Christmas together. As we drove home, he reached across the console and squeezed my hand. You've spent your whole life apologizing for things that aren't your fault. I laughed. I haven't apologized once tonight. You didn't have to. Your face did it for you. He always saw the things I tried hardest to hide. After he died, I stopped attending most family gatherings. Not because I hated them. Because every visit reminded me how peaceful my home felt without constant comparison. Still, there were birthdays, holidays, the occasional obligation that seemed too small to refuse. Lauren never let me forget when I declined. She'd text, "Mom misses you," or, "Emma should spend more time with family." I never argued. Silence required less energy. The strange part was that Emma never complained. She always believed the next gathering might be different. Maybe this year Grandma would hug her first. Maybe Aunt Lauren would remember her birthday without Facebook reminding her. Maybe her cousin Lily would actually play with her instead of rehearsing dance routines for social media. Children are astonishingly optimistic. Adults usually teach them otherwise. Lauren quit her corporate marketing job 2 years earlier. She announced she was becoming a lifestyle creator online. According to her, documenting family life was the future. Her videos featured spotless kitchens, coordinated outfits, smiling children, and captions about gratitude. Everything looked perfect. Everything except reality. What most people didn't know was that perfection cost money. Expensive clothes, professional photography, decorations, sponsored events. Each month, Lauren seemed more desperate to maintain the image she'd built. My mother adored it. She shared every video, left glowing comments, bragged about Lauren's growing audience to anyone willing to listen. She never once shared a picture of Emma's artwork. Not once. One rainy afternoon, about 3 weeks before everything exploded, an elderly gentleman wandered into Willow and Pine, carrying an umbrella older than I was. He spent nearly an hour looking through local history books before stopping at the display of Emma's bookmarks. He picked one up. It showed a little girl sitting beneath an enormous oak tree reading, while tiny lanterns floated through the branches. "Who drew this?" he asked. "My daughter." He smiled. "She sees the world kindly." I wasn't sure what that meant. He bought every bookmark we had. Then he left his business card beside the register. His name was Theodore Marsh, founder of the Marsh Foundation for Young Artists. I slipped the card into the drawer beneath the counter without giving it much thought. Some opportunities arrive quietly. You don't recognize them until much later. At home that evening, Emma sat cross-legged on the living room floor sketching birds from memory. Without looking up, she asked, "Mom?" "Yes." "Do you think Dad would be proud of me?" The question caught me off guard. I know he would. Even if I'm not the best? I knelt beside her. "Your father never wanted you to be the best." She frowned. "He wanted you to be kind. Being the best only lasts until someone better comes along." "But kindness," I touched her heart gently, "stays here forever." She smiled. Then she added another bird to the page. I didn't realize that conversation would become the last peaceful evening before everything changed. Because 2 days later, Lauren invited us to Lily's birthday party. And for the first time in years, she insisted Emma arrive an hour early. "It's a surprise," the text read. "We want Emma to help make Lily's birthday unforgettable." I stared at the message for a long time. Emma looked over my shoulder. Her eyes lit up. "She picked me?" "For reasons I still can't fully explain." I ignored the warning in my chest. I smiled. "Looks like she did." That single decision would change every relationship in our family forever. The invitation sat on my kitchen counter for 2 days. It was printed on thick cream-colored paper with tiny watercolor flowers around the edges. Lily's 13th birthday celebration, Saturday, 2:00 p.m. Family only. Emma picked it up at least 10 times before the party. Every time she smiled, as if reading it somehow made the invitation more real. "Do you think Lily actually wants me there?" she asked while packing a small gift into silver wrapping paper. "I think she invited you." That's not what I asked. Children always notice the difference. I looked at her carefully. "I hope she does." Emma nodded without another word, but I could tell my answer hadn't convinced her. She knew what family gatherings usually felt like. She simply refused to stop hoping. That was one trait she inherited from her father. Daniel believed every broken relationship could heal if people chose kindness. I used to believe that too. Saturday arrived with warm sunshine and a gentle breeze carrying the scent of blooming jasmine through our neighborhood. Emma spent nearly an hour deciding what to wear. She finally settled on a pale blue summer dress Daniel had bought before he passed away. It no longer fit perfectly, but she refused to donate it. "It makes me feel brave," she once told me. Sometimes courage comes stitched into old memories. As we prepared to leave, she disappeared into her bedroom. When she returned, she was carrying a neatly wrapped canvas. "You made another painting?" She smiled. "It's for Lily." I carefully unwrapped one corner. It showed 2 girls standing beneath a giant oak tree sharing a swing. Warm afternoon sunlight filtered through green leaves, while tiny wildflowers covered the grass beneath them. The girls looked happy. Closer than sisters. Closer than cousins. Exactly the relationship Emma wished she had. My throat tightened. "Sweetheart, I know she probably won't hang it. But maybe she'll like it anyway." I kissed her forehead. Anyone would be lucky to receive something made with this much love. She beamed. Those words meant everything to her. The drive to my mother's house took nearly 30 minutes. Emma spent most of it staring out the window. Every few miles, she'd ask another question. "Do you think Grandma baked my favorite cookies?" Maybe. Do you think Lily still likes drawing? I hope so. Do you think Aunt Lauren remembers I don't like being photographed? That question surprised me. Why would you ask that? Emma shrugged. She always tells me to smile for her videos. I don't like pretending. I reached over and squeezed her hand. If anyone points a camera at you today and you don't want to be filmed, you tell me. I will. When we pulled into my mother's driveway, expensive cars already lined both sides of the street. Much bigger gathering than I expected. Lauren stood near the front door greeting guests, while someone recorded short video clips with a professional camera. She wasn't simply hosting a birthday party. She was producing content. The moment she spotted us, she walked over with her brightest smile. There you are. She hugged me quickly before kneeling in front of Emma. My goodness. You've gotten so tall. Emma smiled politely. Happy birthday to Lily. Lauren accepted the wrapped painting without looking at it. I'm sure she'll love it. Then she glanced toward the driveway. Oh, good. The photographer's here. Before either of us could respond, Lauren gently turned Emma toward the camera. Smile. Emma froze. The photographer lifted his camera. Click. 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 Emma's smile looked forced. Lauren never noticed. Perfect, she said. She immediately hurried away to greet another guest. Emma quietly stepped beside me. I told you. I wrapped an arm around her shoulders. You did. Inside, the house looked nothing like my mother's home. Every room had been transformed with elegant decorations in soft pink and gold. Fresh flowers covered nearly every table. There was even a dessert display worthy of a wedding reception. This must have cost a fortune, I whispered. My mother overheard. You only turned 13 once. Then she looked at me. Lauren knows how to make memories. I smiled politely. Apparently, bookstores still didn't qualify. Lily finally appeared wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill. She hugged several friends before walking toward us. Hi, Aunt Grace. She hugged me. Then she looked at Emma. Oh. You're here. Emma handed her the wrapped painting. Happy birthday. Lily accepted it. Thanks. She placed it on a nearby table without opening it. Then one of her friends called her name. Within seconds, she was gone again. Emma watched silently. I recognized that expression. Disappointment hidden beneath understanding. It's okay, she whispered before I could say anything. I know she's busy. Children shouldn't have to explain away other people's indifference. My mother announced lunch would be served in 30 minutes. Guests spread throughout the house chatting, while soft music played from hidden speakers. I noticed Lauren constantly directing people. Stand over there. Smile. One more picture. Perfect. Nothing happened naturally. Every conversation paused whenever the camera appeared. Everything felt staged. Emma wandered toward the sunroom, where several younger children were drawing on large sheets of paper. Within minutes, they were laughing together. She always found the quiet kids. Always the ones left out. Daniel used to say kindness recognizes loneliness. Across the room, I noticed Theodore Marsh, the elderly gentleman from my bookstore. He was speaking with one of the guests. Apparently, they knew each other. When he saw me, his face brightened. Grace. He walked over, shaking my hand warmly. What a pleasant surprise. You know my family? He chuckled. Business acquaintance. Lauren asked if our foundation might sponsor one of her community projects. Interesting. She'd never mentioned that. His eyes drifted toward the children. Which one is your daughter? I pointed toward Emma. She was helping a little boy draw a dragon after he'd accidentally torn his paper. Theodore smiled. I knew it. How? She notices people who feel invisible. Artists usually do. Before I could respond, Lauren appeared. There you are, Mr. Marsh. She smiled so brightly it almost looked painful. I've been looking everywhere. She barely acknowledged me before guiding him toward the dining room. Theodore glanced back once. He nodded politely. Something about Lauren's behavior felt rehearsed, as if meeting him was the true purpose behind the party. Around 1 o'clock, my phone buzzed. A customer needed help locating a rare first edition that had just arrived at the bookstore. I stepped onto the back porch to return the call. The conversation lasted maybe 8 minutes. When I walked back inside, Emma was gone. I checked the sunroom. Empty. Kitchen. Nothing. Living room. No sign of her. My pulse quickened. I finally spotted Lily walking upstairs carrying several gift bags. Have you seen Emma? Mom took her upstairs. For what? I don't know. My stomach tightened. I climbed the stairs. Halfway up, I heard Lauren laughing behind one of the closed bedroom doors. Then my mother's voice. It'll look so much better. Another woman laughed. Someone said, she'll thank you later. I frowned. Something about those words felt wrong. I walked toward the guest bedroom. The door was closed. Just as I reached for the handle, I heard Emma. But, my mom said. Then silence, followed by Lauren's calm voice. Trust me. I knocked. No answer. I tried the handle. Locked. Lauren? Still nothing. I knocked harder. Emma? A chair scraped across the floor inside. Then a whisper. Then another burst of laughter. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Every instinct I had screamed that something wasn't right. I pulled out my phone and called Lauren. I could hear it ringing inside the room. No one answered. Open the door. Silence. I knocked again, harder this time. Emma! Finally, my daughter answered. Her voice shook. Mom. Before she could say another word, someone inside turned the lock. The door slowly opened only a few inches. Lauren stood there smiling. Everything's fine. Behind her, I caught the briefest glimpse of Emma sitting in front of a vanity mirror. Her shoulders were trembling, and scattered across the white wooden floor were dozens of long strands of chestnut hair. I pushed the door open before Lauren could stop me. For a moment, the entire room became silent. Emma sat frozen in the chair, gripping the armrests so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she wasn't making a sound anymore. She looked like she'd cried until there were no tears left to spare. Her beautiful chestnut hair she'd spent years growing, was gone. One side had been hacked off to barely reach her jaw. The other still hung unevenly past her shoulders. It wasn't a haircut. It was humiliation. Long strands covered the hardwood floor around her feet, like someone had swept autumn leaves into a pile. The room smelled faintly of hairspray. A pair of salon scissors rested on the vanity. My mother stood near the window with her arms crossed. Lauren leaned casually against the dresser. Lily stood behind them, staring at the floor. Another woman I recognized as Lauren's hairstylist friend slowly lowered her phone. She had been recording. What? My voice barely came out. Did you do? Lauren sighed dramatically. Oh, Grace. Don't overreact. I walked straight to Emma. The second she saw me, she threw herself into my arms. I'm sorry, Mom. She sobbed so hard she could barely breathe. I'm so sorry. My heart shattered. I knelt beside her. You have nothing to apologize for. She buried her face against my shoulder. I told them no. I kept saying no. They said it was a surprise. Every word made my blood run colder. I looked up slowly. Lauren didn't appear ashamed. She appeared annoyed. She agreed at first. Emma immediately shook her head. I didn't. I said I wanted to ask my mom. Lauren rolled her eyes. Children change their minds. We were helping. I stood. For the first time in my life, I truly understood what controlled anger felt like. It wasn't loud. It wasn't explosive. It was terrifyingly calm. You cut my daughter's hair. After she said no, my mother stepped forward. It's only hair. There was gum stuck in it. Emma looked up in disbelief. There wasn't any gum. My mother ignored her. It looked messy. We decided to fix it. I stared at the scissors. Then at the phone still lying on the vanity. Why was someone recording? Nobody answered. Lauren quickly picked up the phone. It was just behind-the-scenes footage. Footage? She smiled awkwardly. For Lily's birthday video. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You turned my child into content? It wasn't like that. Then explain exactly what it was like. Lauren folded her arms. Emma has such long hair. We thought it would be meaningful if she donated it. I looked at Emma. Did you want to donate your hair? She shook her head violently. No. I've been growing it since Dad. Her voice cracked. Since Dad used to braid it. The room became painfully quiet. Daniel used to spend Sunday mornings watching online tutorials because he wanted to learn different braids for Emma before school. He wasn't very good at first. Some looked crooked. Others fell apart before breakfast. Emma loved every single one. She used to joke that messy braids were made with extra love. After Daniel died, she refused to cut her hair. Not because she disliked haircuts, because it reminded her of him. Lauren knew that. My mother knew that. Every person standing in that room knew. Yet someone still picked up those scissors. You knew. My voice barely rose above a whisper. You all knew. Nobody could meet my eyes. Except Lauren. Grace. You can't live in the past forever. She's just hair. That sentence echoed inside my head. Just hair. Just memories. Just a little girl. Just another sacrifice for someone else's perfect image. Something inside me became very still. I looked toward Lily. She hadn't spoken once. Tears were quietly rolling down her face. Lily. She slowly looked up. Did you know this was going to happen? She hesitated, then nodded. I thought... Her voice trembled. I thought Emma wanted a makeover. Lauren spun toward her daughter. Lily. Enough. But it was too late. Lily wiped her eyes. I heard Emma crying. I told Mom to stop. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. The kind of silence that exposes truth better than any confession. I reached for Emma's hand. We're leaving. Lauren stepped in front of the door. You can't leave yet. I stared at her. What? The guests are waiting. The cake hasn't been cut. So? You'll ruin Lily's birthday. For one unbelievable second. I actually wondered if she was joking. She wasn't. My mother nodded in agreement. People came a long way. Don't make a scene. I looked around the room. My crying daughter. The scissors. The piles of hair. The camera. Then my own family worrying about appearances. I gently moved Lauren aside. She grabbed my wrist. Grace. You always do this. You make everything dramatic. Without raising my voice, I removed her hand. No. You've confused silence with forgiveness for far too long. I wrapped one arm around Emma. With the other, I picked up the wrapped painting she'd brought for Lily. It was still sitting unopened on the dresser. Emma noticed. You don't have to take it, she whispered. I looked at the painting. No. I think I do. We walked downstairs together. The music was still playing. Children laughed in the backyard. Someone carried another tray of drinks through the kitchen. No one knew what had happened upstairs. Not yet. As we reached the living room, Lauren hurried after us. Grace. People turned. Conversation stopped. She forced a smile. Everything's fine. I didn't answer. Emma held my hand tighter. One of the guests looked at her uneven hair and gasped. Another whispered something to his wife. Within seconds, the room had noticed. The music suddenly felt too loud. Lauren laughed nervously. It was just a little makeover. Nobody looked convinced. Then Theodore Marsh stepped into the hallway. His eyes landed on Emma. The smile disappeared from his face. He looked at the hair, then at me, then at Lauren. What happened? Lauren answered immediately. Just a fun birthday surprise. Theodore didn't respond. Instead, he looked directly at Emma. Young lady, did you want your hair cut? Emma clung to my arm. Her voice was barely audible. No. One word. That was all it took. Every conversation in the house stopped. You could have heard a pin drop. Theodore slowly turned toward Lauren. His expression changed completely. Gone was the cheerful grandfatherly smile I'd seen in my bookstore. Standing before us now was a man who had spent decades judging character instead of appearances. I suggest, he said quietly, that someone tells me the truth. No one spoke. Because for the first time that afternoon, the truth had finally found witnesses. The silence felt heavier than shouting. No one reached for another drink. No one smiled for another photograph. The music continued playing softly through hidden speakers, but it suddenly sounded out of place, as though the house itself hadn't realized the celebration had already ended. Theodore Marsh waited. He didn't repeat his question. He simply looked from one face to another. Years of leading a charitable foundation had taught him something important. People often revealed the truth when they became uncomfortable with silence. Lauren was the first to speak. It's honestly being blown out of proportion. She forced a laugh. We wanted to surprise Emma with a fresh look before taking family pictures. Her words sounded rehearsed, like she'd already practiced explaining this to someone. Theodore folded his hands in front of him. A surprise? Yes. And the child agreed? Of course. No. Emma's quiet voice interrupted. Everyone turned toward her. She was still holding my hand so tightly I could barely feel my fingers. I said no. I asked for my mom. I kept asking. Several guests exchanged uneasy glances. One woman quietly lowered the glass she had been holding. Another stepped closer, trying to hear better. Lauren smiled awkwardly. She's upset. She doesn't remember. Emma looked directly at her. I remember everything. The room fell silent again. For the first time that afternoon, I noticed several people weren't looking at Lauren anymore. They were looking at Emma. And they believed her. My mother stepped forward. Emma, sweetheart. We were trying to help. You'll understand when you're older. Emma wiped another tear away. My dad loved my hair. The sentence was so simple. Yet it carried more weight than every excuse that had been offered. My mother opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She hadn't expected that answer. Neither had Lauren. Theodore looked at me. Grace, would you mind telling me exactly what happened? I took a slow breath. My daughter was invited here early. They took her upstairs. They locked the door. They ignored her when she asked for me. They cut her hair after she repeatedly refused. Every sentence landed like another stone in the room. No exaggeration. No raised voice. Just facts. Lauren immediately interrupted. That's not how it happened. Then explain. She hesitated. It wasn't locked. At that exact moment, Lily spoke. Mom locked it. Every head turned. Lauren's face lost all color. Lily. Stop. But something had changed inside her daughter. Perhaps watching Emma cry had finally become too much. Perhaps she'd spent too many years pretending everything was normal. Either way. She continued. I heard Emma trying to open the door. Mom said she'd calm down once it was finished. A murmur spread through the guests. One man whispered something under his breath. Someone else quietly shook their head. Lauren looked around desperately. It wasn't like that. No one understands. Theodore's voice remained calm. Then help us understand. She swallowed. I wanted matching hairstyles. Everyone frowned. She hurried to explain. The sponsor coming today loves transformation videos. They suggested a cousin makeover. I thought. Her voice grew weaker. I thought it would perform well online. I stared at her. You cut my daughter's hair. For social media? It wasn't only that. You expected sponsorship. Lauren's silence answered for her. The realization spread through the room almost visibly. Several guests instinctively stepped away from her. One elderly aunt covered her mouth. You filmed it. For views? No one denied it. The photographer standing near the dining room slowly raised his hand. Everyone looked at him. I need to say something. Lauren's eyes widened. David. He ignored her. I wasn't hired to record children crying. I was told we were documenting a birthday makeover. His face filled with regret. When the girl started begging for her mother, I stopped filming. He reached into his camera bag. I left. Lauren looked horrified. You weren't supposed to. I've worked weddings for 15 years. He interrupted gently. I've seen nervous brides, crying toddlers, family arguments. I've never seen adults ignore a child saying no. His words echoed through the room. My mother suddenly spoke. Everyone needs to calm down. It was a mistake. Theodore looked at her. No. A mistake is accidentally spilling punch. This required multiple adults making multiple decisions. My mother fell silent. I noticed Lily quietly walking toward Emma. She looked terrified. I'm sorry. Emma looked at her cousin. You didn't cut my hair. I should have stopped them. You tried. Lily burst into tears. I wasn't brave enough. Emma surprised everyone. She hugged her. Neither girl said another word. Watching them, I realized something. The adults had failed. The children hadn't. Children still understood compassion. Adults had traded it for pride. Lauren suddenly stepped toward me. I'll pay for extensions. I stared at her. She honestly believed money could fix this. You think that's the problem? I can call the best stylist. You don't understand. No. I answered quietly. You don't. Emma gently tugged on my sleeve. Mom. I knelt beside her. What is it? She whispered into my ear. I don't want everyone looking at me. That was enough. I stood. We're leaving. No one blocked the doorway this time. As we walked outside, Theodore followed us. So did David, the photographer. When we reached my car, Theodore handed me a business card. The same one he'd left at my bookstore. I was planning to speak with you next week. He glanced at Emma. Now I think it should be sooner. I looked at him curiously. What do you mean? I've spent months searching for a young artist to receive our foundation's Creative Promise Scholarship. I blinked. What? I bought every one of Emma's bookmarks because I wanted to see whether the talent belonged to luck or consistency. It wasn't luck. He smiled warmly at Emma. I've reviewed every sketch your mother emailed after our meeting. Emma looked confused. You've seen my drawings? Every single one. She looked at me. You sent them? I smiled softly. I wanted someone else to see what I see every day. Theodore reached into his briefcase. I intended to surprise you next Friday. He handed Emma a sealed envelope. But I think you deserve some good news today. Emma carefully opened it. Her hands were still shaking. She unfolded the letter. Her eyes moved slowly across the page. Then she stopped. She looked at me. Mom? What does this mean? I read the first line. Congratulations. You have been selected as this year's recipient of the Creative Promise Scholarship, including full tuition for 5 years of advanced art education, mentorship from nationally recognized artists, and a $50,000 educational trust to support your future. I felt my knees weaken. Emma stared at the page as if she couldn't understand the words. Theodore smiled. You earned every bit of it. Behind us, the front door opened. Lauren stepped onto the porch. What scholarship? Theodore turned toward her. His expression became serious once more. The scholarship your daughter was never being considered for. Lauren frowned. What? Our board reviews character as carefully as talent. His voice remained steady. Today, I witnessed the character of two young girls. He looked first at Emma, then at Lily. One showed kindness while being hurt. The other found the courage to tell the truth. He paused. And I witnessed the character of several adults. Lauren's smile disappeared. I don't think we'll be partnering on any future projects. The words hit her harder than any argument ever could. Because for the first time in years, her carefully crafted image had started to crack. And she had no idea that the worst was still to come. The drive home felt impossibly quiet. Emma sat in the passenger seat with the scholarship letter folded neatly in her lap. She hadn't spoken since we left my mother's house. Every few minutes, she gently touched the uneven ends of her hair before quickly pulling her hand away. Each time she did, another piece of my heart broke. I kept glancing at her at red lights. I wanted to say something. Anything. But there are wounds that words only make deeper. Halfway home, she finally whispered, Mom? Yes, sweetheart? Do I look ugly now? The question hit me harder than anything that had happened all afternoon. I pulled the car onto the shoulder without thinking. The engine idled softly while birds chirped somewhere beyond the trees. I turned toward her. She refused to meet my eyes. Instead, she stared at the sleeve of Daniel's old hoodie that she'd brought with her. I reached across the console and took both of her hands. Emma. She blinked rapidly. I need you to listen to me. She nodded. You are not your hair. Another tear escaped. But everyone stared. They stared because kind people were shocked. They weren't judging you. They were wondering how adults could hurt someone they were supposed to protect. She looked down. Dad liked brushing it. I know. He said it looked like autumn leaves. I remember. He promised we'd cut it together when I was ready. The words caught in her throat. I wasn't ready. Neither was I. I wrapped my arms around her. She cried into my shoulder until there were no tears left. Then, quietly, she asked the question I'd been afraid of. Why doesn't Grandma love me the way she loves Lily? No parent is ever prepared for that question, especially when the child already knows the answer. I gently brushed a few uneven strands away from her face. Grandma loves differently than she should. Emma frowned. Is it because Daddy died? No. Because we don't have as much money? No. Because of me? I immediately shook my head. Never because of you. Then why? I stared out the windshield. The truth was ugly. Some people choose favorites because it makes them feel powerful. Others simply never learn how to love fairly. Children shouldn't have to carry that burden. It's because adults sometimes make terrible choices. That's their failure. Not yours. She leaned against me. I still wish I had a normal family. So do I. After a long silence, she smiled faintly. I guess we have each other. I kissed the top of her head. And that's enough. When we reached home, the bookstore was already closed. The little bell above the entrance jingled softly as we walked through the front door. The familiar smell of books, coffee, and cedar instantly made the building feel like a safe place again. Emma took a deep breath. It smells like Dad. It always will. She smiled for the first time all day. Mrs. Harper, my 70-year-old assistant, looked up from the register. There you are. Then she saw Emma. The smile vanished from her face. "Oh, sweetheart." She hurried around the counter. "What happened?" Before I could answer, Emma quietly said, "I got a scholarship." Mrs. Harper blinked. "What?" Emma held up the letter. "I also had a bad day." Mrs. Harper looked at the letter, then at Emma's hair. Without asking another question, she hugged her. Not tightly. Just enough to remind her she wasn't alone. Some people have a gift. They know when silence is kinder than curiosity. Mrs. Harper was one of those people. "I just finished baking cinnamon rolls," she said. "I think scholarship winners deserve 2. Emma actually laughed. "A whole 2? Maybe 3. That tiny laugh felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Later that evening, after Emma had fallen asleep on the reading couch upstairs, I finally opened my phone. 137 missed notifications. Most came from relatives. The rest, from strangers. My stomach tightened. I opened the first message. "Grace, are you okay?" The second. "Call me immediately." The third. "I just saw the video." Video? My heart stopped. I opened social media. Lauren's newest post had disappeared. But Kopi's hadn't. Someone had screen recorded the live stream before it was deleted. It had already spread across multiple platforms. The clip began innocently. Birthday decorations. Laughing guests. David didn't waste time with small talk. His voice sounded tired. "I've been sitting here for 3 hours trying to decide what the right thing is." I glanced toward the reading corner upstairs. Emma was finally asleep, curled beneath Daniel's old quilt with the scholarship letter tucked beside her pillow. "I'm listening." I have the entire afternoon on camera. My heartbeat slowed. "The whole party?" "Almost. I started filming before guests arrived." He paused. "There are conversations I don't think Lauren realized were being recorded." I sat straighter. "What kind of conversations?" "The kind that change everything." Silence filled the line. "I'd rather show you than explain." "When?" "I'm outside your bookstore." I looked through the front window. A silver SUV sat beneath the street lamp. David stepped out holding a hard camera case. 5 minutes later, we sat around the small table near the bookstore cafe. Mrs. Harper quietly locked the front door before bringing us 3 mugs of coffee. She didn't ask questions. She simply squeezed my shoulder. "I'll be upstairs if you need me." David removed a laptop from his bag. "I've backed everything up. I haven't shown this to anyone." He hesitated. "I wanted you to decide what happens next." I nodded. "Show me." The video began. Timestamp 11:48 a.m. Guests laughed while children ran across the backyard. Everything looked perfectly normal. Lauren moved through the crowd, greeting people with practiced enthusiasm. Then the camera captured something unexpected. Lauren walked toward the patio where my mother was arranging flowers. Neither noticed David filming decorative shots nearby. Their voices became clear. Lauren whispered, "Mr. Marsh has already arrived." My mother smiled. "Good. He'll finally see what an amazing family you have." Lauren lowered her voice. "I just need everything to look perfect." "What about Emma?" "She's perfect for the makeover." My stomach tightened. The recording continued. My mother laughed softly. "Grace won't like it. So we won't ask." Both women chuckled. I felt sick. David paused the video. I almost deleted everything after I heard that. He looked at me. I wish I had stopped them. I shook my head. You couldn't have known. He swallowed. I should have. No. I answered quietly. The people responsible were in that room. Not behind the camera. He pressed play again. The next clip showed guests gathering in the dining room. Then Lily walked into frame. She looked nervous. She approached Lauren. The microphone barely picked up her voice. Mom, I don't think Emma wants to cut her hair. Lauren smiled without looking up from her phone. She'll be fine. But she said, Lily, I'm handling it. Lily walked away. Her shoulders slumped. David paused again. I remember thinking she looked frightened. I nodded slowly. So she really tried. Yes. Another clip. This one nearly stopped my heart. Emma stood beside the staircase, holding her wrapped painting. Lauren approached carrying 2 matching pink gift bags. There you are. Emma smiled. I thought everyone was outside. They are. Lauren held up one of the bags. I have a surprise. What kind? You and Lily are going to match. Emma frowned. My mom usually wants to know before. It'll only take a few minutes. Emma hesitated. I'd rather wait. Lauren laughed. Don't be silly. Then she gently placed a hand on Emma's shoulder and guided her upstairs. Emma looked back twice. Searching. Looking for me. I wasn't there. Because I was outside taking that phone call. I closed my eyes. The guilt hit me all over again. David quietly said, You didn't know. I should have stayed. You trusted your family. I shouldn't have. No. His voice remained firm. They betrayed that trust. Those words didn't erase the guilt. But they made it easier to breathe. The final recording shook both of us. The camera had accidentally remained recording inside David's equipment bag while he searched for extra batteries upstairs. The lens couldn't see anything. Only darkness. But the microphone captured everything. Emma's frightened voice. I don't want to. Lauren. It'll be over before you know it. Emma again. Please wait for my mom. Another unfamiliar woman's voice. Hold still. Then, the unmistakable sound of scissors. Emma crying. I said no. Someone sighed impatiently. It'll grow back. Emma sobbing harder. I want my dad. My hands began shaking uncontrollably. I couldn't keep listening. David immediately stopped the recording. Neither of us spoke for almost a minute. Finally, he whispered, I'm so sorry. I stared at the black laptop screen. Not because I was angry. Because hearing Emma call for Daniel, knowing he wasn't there, was somehow worse than seeing her hair on the floor. David slid a small memory card across the table. This is yours. What are you going to do? I've already resigned from Lauren's account. He smiled sadly. I don't think I'll be filming influencers anymore. I looked at him. Thank you. He shook his head. I don't deserve thanks. You do. No. I watched warning signs. I didn't understand them quickly enough. I understood that feeling. Parents carry it. Teachers carry it. Good people carry it. The constant belief they could have done more. Sometimes, the blame belongs somewhere else. Before David left, he handed me one final envelope. What's this? My invoice. I looked confused. I thought Lauren hired you. She did. I refunded every penny. He smiled faintly. Then I donated the same amount. Inside the envelope was a receipt. Donation made in honor of Emma Bennett, local Children's Art Center. Amount 5 Tabzama 0. At the bottom he'd written one sentence by hand. No child should lose part of themselves because an adult wanted applause. For the first time all day, I cried. Not because of what we'd lost, but because strangers kept reminding me that kindness still existed. The next morning, the bell above the bookstore door rang before opening hours. I expected another customer. Instead, I found Lily standing alone outside. She held the painting Emma had made. It was no longer wrapped. The paper had been carefully folded beneath her arm. Her eyes were swollen from crying. Can I come in? I unlocked the door without hesitation. She stepped inside quietly. I rode my bike. Does your mom know you're here? She looked down. No. She placed the painting gently on the counter. I should have opened it yesterday. For the first time, I saw the artwork in full daylight. Emma had painted herself and Lily beneath an enormous oak tree. Both girls were laughing, sharing a swing tied to one of its branches. Above them, Daniel's favorite quote had been written in tiny, elegant lettering. Air Love is the place where people never have to earn belonging. Lily burst into tears. I don't deserve this. I gently placed a hand on her shoulder. What happened yesterday wasn't your fault. I could have stopped Mom. You were scared. I still should have. She wiped her eyes. I came because... She reached into her backpack. There's something Emma needs to know. She pulled out a small pink phone. My mom forgot this upstairs. It's connected to her cloud account. I frowned. What are you saying? Lily looked directly at me. There are messages. What kind of messages? She took a shaky breath. The kind that prove... Mom planned everything weeks before the party. David didn't waste time with small talk. His voice sounded tired. I've been sitting here for 3 hours trying to decide what the right thing is. I glanced toward the reading corner upstairs. Emma was finally asleep, curled beneath Daniel's old quilt with the scholarship letter tucked beside her pillow. I'm listening. I have the entire afternoon on camera. My heartbeat slowed. The whole party? Almost. I started filming before guests arrived. He paused. There are conversations I don't think Lauren realized were being recorded. I sat straighter. What kind of conversations? The kind that change everything. Silence filled the line. I'd rather show you than explain. When? I'm outside your bookstore. I looked through the front window. A silver SUV sat beneath the street lamp. David stepped out holding a hard camera case. 5 minutes later, we sat around the small table near the bookstore cafe. Mrs. Harper quietly locked the front door before bringing us 3 mugs of coffee. She didn't ask questions. She simply squeezed my shoulder. I'll be upstairs if you need me. David removed a laptop from his bag. I've backed everything up. I haven't shown this to anyone. He hesitated. I wanted you to decide what happens next. I nodded. Show me. The video began. Timestamp 11:48 a.m. Guests laughed while children ran across the backyard. Everything looked perfectly normal. Lauren moved through the crowd, greeting people with practiced enthusiasm. Then the camera captured something unexpected. Lauren walked toward the patio where my mother was arranging flowers. Neither noticed David filming decorative shots nearby. Their voices became clear. Lauren whispered, "Mr. Marsh has already arrived." My mother smiled. "Good. He'll finally see what an amazing family you have." Lauren lowered her voice. "I just need everything to look perfect." "What about Emma?" "She's perfect for the makeover." My stomach tightened. The recording continued. My mother laughed softly. "Grace won't like it. So we won't ask." Both women chuckled. I felt sick. David paused the video. I almost deleted everything after I heard that. He looked at me. I wish I had stopped them. I shook my head. You couldn't have known. He swallowed. I should have. No. I answered quietly. The people responsible were in that room. Not behind the camera. He pressed play again. The next clip showed guests gathering in the dining room. Then Lily walked into frame. She looked nervous. She approached Lauren. The microphone barely picked up her voice. "Mom, I don't think Emma wants to cut her hair." Lauren smiled without looking up from her phone. "She'll be fine." But she said, "Lily, I'm handling it." Lily walked away. Her shoulders slumped. David paused again. I remember thinking she looked frightened. I nodded slowly. So she really tried. Yes. Another clip. This one nearly stopped my heart. Emma stood beside the staircase, holding her wrapped painting. Lauren approached carrying 2 matching pink gift bags. "There you are." Emma smiled. "I thought everyone was outside." "They are." Lauren held up one of the bags. "I have a surprise." "What kind?" "You and Lily are going to match." Emma frowned. "My mom usually wants to know before." "It'll only take a few minutes." Emma hesitated. "I'd rather wait." Lauren laughed. "Don't be silly." Then she gently placed a hand on Emma's shoulder and guided her upstairs. Emma looked back twice. Searching. Looking for me. I wasn't there. Lily's hands were trembling so badly she nearly dropped the phone. She looked over her shoulder toward the bookstore windows, as though she expected her mother to appear at any moment. "I know this is wrong," she whispered. "But what Mom did was worse." I carefully took the phone. Its screen was still unlocked. "How did you get this?" "She left it charging in her office." I remembered the passcode. "You know it?" Lily nodded. "It's my birthday." She laughed bitterly. I guess that's the only date she'll never forget. The sadness in that sentence broke something inside me. For years I'd watched Lily receive everything money could buy. Designer clothes. Luxury vacations. The newest electronics. I'd assumed she was the lucky one. Standing in front of me now, I realized she'd been starving for something none of those gifts could provide. A mother's unconditional love. "Is Emma awake?" Lily asked. "Not yet." She looked relieved. "I don't want her to see me cry again." I led her to the reading corner upstairs. Morning sunlight streamed through the large windows, making the rows of books glow with soft golden light. The bookstore had always felt peaceful. Today it felt like sanctuary. I placed Lauren's phone on the table. What exactly am I looking for? Lily pointed toward a messaging app. The group called. She swallowed. Perfect party. I opened it. The conversation stretched back nearly a month. At first it looked ordinary. Discussions about decorations, cake flavors, guest lists. Then, the messages changed. Lauren, Mr. Marsh is definitely attending. Event planner, it's great opportunity. Lauren, ask exactly. I need something memorable. Another message. 3 weeks before the party. Lauren, thinking of a cousin makeover reveal. A stylist replied. Love the idea. Before and after content always performs well. My stomach tightened. I kept scrolling. Then came the message that made my blood run cold. Lauren, Escon Emma still has that ridiculously long hair. It would be perfect. The stylist responded. Will she agree? Lauren's answer appeared seconds later. She doesn't have to. Kids resist everything at first. Piss. I stared at the screen. Unable to move. Unable to breathe. Lily quietly wiped away another tear. I told her not to. I nodded slowly. I know. Further down. Another message. Margaret, Grace will make this difficult. Lauren replied almost immediately. We'll keep her busy downstairs. Just don't let Emma see her first. There it was. Proof. Not a misunderstanding. Not poor judgment. Planning. Weeks of planning. I continued scrolling. There were screenshots of hairstyle ideas. Lists of camera angles. Suggested captions. Even potential video titles. Evan Shade's Shy Girl's amazing birthday transformation. 8. She couldn't believe the final result. Erai to a confidence makeover gone emotional. Every title had been designed to attract viewers. None mentioned consent. None mentioned fear. None mentioned a 12-year-old girl begging for her mother. Mrs. Harper walked quietly upstairs carrying fresh tea. She noticed my face immediately. What happened? I turned the phone toward her. She read only 3 messages before closing her eyes. Oh my. She sat down heavily. They planned this. Every detail. Lily whispered. I'm sorry. Mrs. Harper immediately reached across the table and took Lily's hand. No, sweetheart. You didn't do this. But she's my mom. And? I love her. Mrs. Harper smiled sadly. You can love someone and still know they're wrong. Lily cried even harder. Just then, footsteps echoed from upstairs. Emma appeared wearing Daniel's oversized hoodie. The sleeves hung well past her hands. Her uneven hair stuck out in every direction after sleeping. She looked at Lily. Neither girl spoke. Finally, Lily stood. I'm sorry. Emma studied her quietly. For what? For not stopping them. Emma walked closer. I know you tried. You heard me? I heard you tell your mom to stop. Lily's eyes filled with tears again. I wasn't brave enough. Emma shook her head. You were braver than everyone else in that room. Without another word, she hugged her. This time, neither girl cried. They simply stood there holding on to each other. Watching them, Mrs. Harper whispered, "The children are teaching the adults." She was right. The peaceful moment lasted less than 5 minutes. The bell downstairs rang violently. Once. Twice. Then repeatedly. Whoever stood outside wasn't waiting politely. Mrs. Harper looked through the front window. Oh dear. What? They're here. I walked downstairs. Outside stood my mother, Lauren, and two unfamiliar men in expensive suits. Lauren's sunglasses hid her eyes, but I could tell she'd barely slept. She knocked again. Grace! I know you're in there. I unlocked the door only halfway. What do you want? Lauren forced a smile. We need to talk. No. This won't take long. No. One of the suited men stepped forward. Mrs. Bennett? My name is Richard Hale. I represent Miss Collins. Attorney. Of course. I folded my arms. You brought a lawyer? Lauren answered quickly. We're trying to fix this. I looked directly at her. You should have tried that yesterday. Richard smiled professionally. My client is prepared to offer a generous settlement. I almost laughed. You think this is about money? Lauren's voice cracked. Grace, I've lost everything. My sponsors. My partnerships. My reputation. For the first time since yesterday. She looked frightened. Not guilty. Frightened. I noticed the difference. What about Emma? What? You've listed everything you've lost. You forgot the only person who mattered. Lauren opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Before anyone spoke again, the bookstore door opened wider. Emma stepped beside me. She looked directly at Lauren. There was no anger in her face anymore. Only disappointment. Lauren's expression softened. Emma. I'm so sorry. Emma tilted her head slightly. Are you sorry because I was hurt? Or because people found out? Silence. Even the lawyer looked uncomfortable. Emma waited. Lauren never answered. Because she couldn't. The truth had already answered for her. At that moment, a black sedan pulled into the parking space across the street. Another followed. Then another. Reporters. Word had spread faster than anyone expected. Camera crews climbed out. Microphones appeared. Someone pointed toward the bookstore. Lauren spun around. No. Her lawyer immediately whispered. We need to leave. Too late. The first reporter crossed the street. Ms. Collins! Do you have a statement regarding the viral video involving your niece? Another called out. Did the child consent to having her hair cut? A third shouted. Is it true the event was planned for online engagement? Lauren's face turned pale. For years, she had dreamed of national media attention. She finally had it. Just not for the reason she'd imagined. I quietly closed the bookstore door. Locked it. Then turned toward Emma. She looked exhausted. I don't want to hear them anymore. You won't. She looked at Lily. Do you want hot chocolate? Lily managed a tiny smile. I'd like that. The two girls walked toward the cafe together. As they disappeared behind the bookshelves, I looked down at Lauren's phone, still resting in my hands. The messages inside weren't just evidence. They were the beginning. Because buried near the bottom of the conversation was a single attachment no one had opened yet. Its file name read, Sponsor Agreement, Transformation Campaign, Confidential. And something told me that document would expose a truth far bigger than a birthday party. The file sat on the counter between us like it weighed 100 pounds. Neither Lily nor I reached for it. Emma and Mrs. Harper were laughing softly in the cafe area, decorating cinnamon rolls with colorful icing. For the first time since the party, Emma sounded like herself again. I wanted to protect that sound. Whatever was inside the confidential agreement could wait another few minutes. Mrs. Harper noticed the envelope and quietly walked over. Good news or bad? I honestly don't know. She looked at Lily. Sweetheart, are you sure you want to be involved? Lily nodded slowly. I don't want to spend the rest of my life pretending I didn't know. There was a quiet strength in her voice that hadn't been there yesterday. Sometimes the hardest thing a person can do is tell the truth about someone they love. I carefully opened the envelope. Inside were several printed pages bearing the logo of a marketing agency I'd never heard of. The title immediately caught my attention. Creative Family Transformation Campaign. I frowned. That sounded more like an advertising proposal than a birthday project. As I continued reading, the details became clearer. The agency had approached several online family creators, offering large sponsorships in exchange for authentic emotional content. The campaign encouraged creators to document meaningful changes in children's lives, learning new skills, overcoming fears, donating toys, volunteering in the community. Most of the ideas were genuinely positive. Then I reached a highlighted paragraph. All transformations involving minors require documented parental consent prior to filming. I read it twice. Then a third time. There it was in plain black ink. Parental consent. Lauren had never asked. She hadn't forgotten. She had ignored the requirement completely. Mrs. Harper leaned closer. That changes everything. I nodded. It proves she knew permission mattered. Lily looked down at the floor. My mom always reads every contract. I know. She never skips anything. The room grew quiet. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't poor communication. It was a choice. A deliberate one. A folded note slipped from the back of the agreement. It wasn't part of the contract. Someone had handwritten it. The handwriting belonged to Lauren. Erin needs something emotional enough to impress sponsors. The audience loves real reactions. Keep Grace distracted until filming is finished. My chest tightened. Mrs. Harper slowly sat down. I've worked with people for 70 years. I've met selfish people. Proud people. Even dishonest people. But planning to use a child's pain as entertainment. She shook her head. I'll never understand that. Neither would I. Just then, Emma walked over carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. One for herself. One for Lily. She noticed the papers. Is everything okay? I quickly stacked the documents. It will be. She looked at me for a long moment. She'd always been able to tell when I was hiding worry. Instead of asking questions, she handed 1 mug to Lily. I added extra marshmallows. Lily smiled faintly. Thanks. Emma sat beside her cousin. You know, I've been thinking. What about? My hair. Lily looked nervous. I'm really sorry. Emma gently interrupted. I know. I'm not talking about that. She absent-mindedly touched the uneven ends. I kept thinking Dad would be upset. I stayed silent. He wouldn't. She smiled softly. I think he'd tell me. She looked toward one of Daniel's old photographs hanging above the bookstore fireplace. That people can't cut away who I am. Tears filled my eyes. That sounded exactly like him. Mrs. Harper quietly wiped her glasses. I think your father would be very proud of that answer. Emma looked down at her hot chocolate. I don't want to hide anymore. What do you mean? I don't want hats. I don't want extensions. I don't want people pretending nothing happened. She took a deep breath. This is what I look like right now. And that's okay. For a 12-year-old child to say those words after everything she'd endured. It humbled every adult in the room. The bookstore bell chimed. A familiar voice called from the entrance. Grace? I walked downstairs. Theodore Marsh stood there carrying a large flat portfolio case. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all. He smiled. I was hoping to meet a remarkable young artist. Emma peeked over the railing upstairs. Her face brightened. Mr. Marsh! He looked up. There she is. He climbed the stairs slowly before placing the portfolio on the table. I brought something I'd like you to see. Emma carefully opened it. Inside were reproductions of paintings created by previous scholarship recipients. Landscapes. Portraits. Murals. Illustrations. Each artist had eventually built a successful career. Emma's eyes grew wider with every page. They're amazing. They are. Theodore smiled. Every one of them started by doubting themselves. Emma looked surprised. Really? Every single one. He knelt beside her. Talent gets people noticed. Character determines how far they go. He glanced briefly toward me. I've been thinking about yesterday. So have I. I'd like to make a request. What kind? I don't want Emma's scholarship story to become known because of the incident. He looked directly at Emma. I want people to remember you for your art, not your pain. Emma smiled. I'd like that. Before leaving, Theodore handed me another sealed envelope. This one's unrelated. What is it? A recommendation. For whom? For you. I looked confused. He laughed softly. Grace, your bookstore has become more than a business. It's become a community. Our foundation is launching a national literacy initiative. We're looking for independent bookstores willing to lead it. I stared at him. You want Willow and Pine? I can't think of a better place. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Daniel had dreamed of the bookstore becoming something bigger than us. Somewhere children could always feel welcome. Somewhere stories could change lives. Maybe. That dream wasn't finished after all. As Theodore prepared to leave, he paused at the doorway. Oh. One more thing. What is it? I received a phone call this morning. From whom? The chairman of the Creative Family Campaign. He smiled knowingly. They're conducting their own investigation. My heart skipped. They've already reviewed the viral footage. And? They're less interested in protecting their brand. He paused just long enough to let the words settle. Than they are in helping the child who was exploited. For the first time since the nightmare began, I realized something important. This story was no longer about revenge. It was about what happened after people chose compassion over silence. And that was a story worth telling. The first Saturday after everything happened felt strangely peaceful. For the first time in weeks, the bookstore opened without reporters waiting outside, without lawyers calling before breakfast, and without the constant vibration of my phone demanding another interview. Willow and Pine was simply a bookstore again. The little bell above the entrance chimed as customers wandered in looking for novels, children's books, and quiet corners to escape the world. Emma sat behind the front counter sketching in a brand-new notebook Theodore had given her. She hadn't tried to hide her uneven haircut. In fact, she'd done something that surprised all of us. She'd asked Mrs. Harper to trim the remaining long side, so everything matched. Now her hair rested just below her ears. Simple. Natural. Confident. The first time she looked into the mirror afterward, she'd smiled. It looks like a new beginning. I realized then that healing doesn't erase pain. It teaches you how to carry it without letting it define you. Around noon, a little girl entered the bookstore holding her father's hand. She couldn't have been older than 9. The moment she saw Emma's sketchbook, her eyes lit up. "Did you draw that?" Emma nodded shyly. "I like dragons." "So do I." Within minutes, the two girls were sitting together at the children's reading table, drawing imaginary creatures with oversized wings and crooked smiles. The little girl's father walked over to me. "Your daughter has a gift." I smiled. "She gets that from her father." He looked toward Emma. "My daughter hasn't smiled much since losing her best friend last year." He paused. "But she's smiling now." I watched the girls laughing together. Sometimes healing spreads quietly. One kind conversation. One shared drawing. One stranger at a time. That afternoon, Theodore returned carrying a stack of folders. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Never." He placed the folders on one of the cafe tables. "I've officially received approval." "For what?" "The Willow and Pine Young Artists Program." I blinked. "The what?" "Our foundation would like to sponsor free weekly art classes here." Mrs. Harper nearly dropped the tray she was carrying. "Here?" Theodore smiled. Children shouldn't have to travel to large cities to discover they're talented. He looked around the bookstore. "This place already feels like home." Emma looked up from her drawing. "Can I help teach little kids someday?" Theodore chuckled. "I was hoping you'd ask." Her face lit up brighter than I'd seen since before Daniel died. Within 2 weeks, the bookstore transformed. One corner became a small art studio. Shelves that once displayed seasonal decorations now held paints, sketchbooks, colored pencils, and easels. Parents began stopping by after school. Children filled the room with laughter every Wednesday afternoon. Some loved watercolor. Others preferred charcoal. One little boy insisted every painting should include at least one dinosaur. Emma patiently encouraged every idea. She never corrected imagination. She expanded it. Watching her with younger children reminded me so much of Daniel. He had always believed confidence grows fastest when someone believes in you first. One Wednesday evening, after class ended, a shy girl lingered behind. Her name was Ava. She quietly handed Emma a folded piece of paper. "I made this." Emma unfolded it carefully. It was a drawing of the bookstore. Above it, written in careful handwriting, were the words, "After this is the first place where nobody laughed at me. 2020. Emma stared at the drawing for a long moment. Then she hugged Ava. Not because the picture was perfect, but because she understood exactly what those words meant. Later that night, after closing, Emma found me shelving books. Mom? Yes? I think I know what I want to do when I grow up. I smiled. Already? She nodded confidently. I want to help kids who think they're not enough. I leaned against the bookshelf. That's a wonderful dream. I don't think I want to be famous. I just... She searched for the right words. Want people to leave happier than they arrived. I laughed softly. You've already started. She looked confused. What do you mean? I pointed toward Ava's drawing, still sitting on the counter. Sometimes changing one person's world is enough. Emma smiled quietly. I think Dad would like that. I know he would. Across town, life looked very different for Lauren. Her once busy home had become painfully quiet. The camera equipment sat untouched in a closet. Brand packages stopped arriving. Her phone no longer buzzed with collaboration requests. Instead, it remained silent for hours. One evening, she found herself scrolling through old family photos. Not the polished ones she'd posted online. The real ones. Camping trips. Messy birthday cakes. Christmas mornings. In one forgotten picture, she and I were children. We were sharing one bicycle because neither of us owned our own. We looked genuinely happy. Lauren stared at that photo for several minutes, then whispered to herself, when did I stop caring about people more than applause? For the first time in years. She wasn't asking the internet. She was asking herself. Meanwhile, Lily had started volunteering every Saturday at the bookstore. She organized children's books, helped younger students clean paintbrushes, read stories aloud to preschoolers. No cameras. No audience. No reward except seeing children smile. One afternoon, she admitted something to Emma. I thought being popular meant everyone liked you. Emma smiled. I think it means being kind. Lily nodded. I like your definition better. As autumn arrived, Theodore announced exciting news. The Young Artists Program would host its first community exhibition. Every child would display one piece of artwork. No competition. No prizes. No judges. Just celebration. Emma spent weeks helping the younger children frame their drawings. She worried more about everyone else's artwork than her own. Mrs. Harper noticed. When are you going to finish your painting? Emma laughed. I already did. She pointed toward a canvas leaning quietly against the wall. Mrs. Harper walked over. The painting showed a massive oak tree. Beneath its branches sat children of every age, reading, painting, laughing, and helping one another. At the center stood a tiny bookstore with warm lights glowing through its windows. Above the doorway hung a simple wooden sign. Everyone belongs here. Mrs. Harper's eyes filled with tears. I've never seen a building smile before. Emma grinned. I wanted it to feel alive. Just then, I walked into the room carrying fresh cookies. I looked at the painting, then at my daughter. At that moment, I realized something that had taken me years to understand. The worst day of our lives had not become the end of Emma's story. It had become the beginning of someone she was always meant to be. And none of us realized that the upcoming art exhibition would bring someone through the bookstore doors who had known Daniel years before we ever met. Someone carrying a small wooden box. A box containing letters my husband had written long ago. Letters that would change Emma's future forever. I think I know what I want to do when I grow up. I smiled. Already? She nodded confidently. I want to help kids who think they're not enough. I leaned against the bookshelf. That's a wonderful dream. I don't think I want to be famous. I just... She searched for the right words. Want people to leave happier than they arrived. I laughed softly. You've already started. She looked confused. What do you mean? I pointed toward Ava's drawing, still sitting on the counter. Sometimes changing one person's world is enough. Emma smiled quietly. I think Dad would like that. I know he would. Across town, life looked very different for Lauren. Her once busy home had become painfully quiet. The camera equipment sat untouched in a closet. Brand packages stopped arriving. Her phone no longer buzzed with collaboration requests. Instead, it remained silent for hours. One evening, she found herself scrolling through old family photos. Not the polished ones she'd posted online. The real ones. Camping trips. Messy birthday cakes. Christmas mornings. In one forgotten picture, she and I were children. We were sharing one bicycle because neither of us owned our own. We looked genuinely happy. Lauren stared at that photo for several minutes, then whispered to herself, when did I stop caring about people more than applause? For the first time in years. She wasn't asking the internet. She was asking herself. Meanwhile, Lily had started volunteering every Saturday at the bookstore. She organized children's books, helped younger students clean paintbrushes, read stories aloud to preschoolers. No cameras. No audience. No reward except seeing children smile. One afternoon, she admitted something to Emma. I thought being popular meant everyone liked you. Emma smiled. I think it means being kind. Lily nodded. I like your definition better. As autumn arrived, Theodore announced exciting news. The Young Artists Program would host its first community exhibition. Every child would display one piece of artwork. No competition. No prizes. No judges. Just celebration. Emma spent weeks helping the younger children frame their drawings. She worried more about everyone else's artwork than her own. Mrs. Harper noticed. When are you going to finish your painting? Emma laughed. I already did. She pointed toward a canvas leaning quietly against the wall. Mrs. Harper walked over. The painting showed a massive oak tree. Beneath its branches sat children of every age, reading, painting, laughing, and helping one another. At the center stood a tiny bookstore with warm lights glowing through its windows. Above the doorway hung a simple wooden sign. Everyone belongs here. Mrs. Harper's eyes filled with tears. I've never seen a building smile before. Emma grinned. I wanted it to feel alive. Just then, I walked into the room carrying fresh cookies. I looked at the painting, then at my daughter. At that moment, I realized something that had taken me years to understand. The worst day of our lives had not become the end of Emma's story. It had become the beginning of someone she was always meant to be. And none of us realized that the upcoming art exhibition would bring someone through the bookstore doors who had known Daniel years before we ever met. Someone carrying a small wooden box. A box containing letters my husband had written long ago. Letters that would change Emma's future forever. The day of the Willow and Pine Community Art Exhibition arrived beneath a sky painted with soft autumn clouds. Golden leaves drifted through the streets of Cedar Ridge, collecting along sidewalks like nature had rolled out a welcome carpet. Inside the bookstore, excitement filled every corner. Dozens of children's paintings lined the walls. Colorful paper lanterns hung from the ceiling. Fresh flowers decorated every reading table. Mrs. Harper stood on a ladder hanging the final banner. It read, "Every story matters. Every dream belongs." Emma walked through the room one last time, making tiny adjustments to each child's display. She straightened crooked frames, replaced missing name cards, encouraged nervous young artists. "You'll do great. They're going to love it. I'm proud of you." She said those words so often that afternoon, I wasn't sure she realized how much they meant. Theodore watched quietly from across the room. "She's becoming exactly who she needed when she was younger." I smiled. "I think so too." By 3 o'clock, the bookstore was full. Parents admired paintings. Children eagerly pointed toward their artwork. Neighbors filled the cafe with warm conversation and laughter. There wasn't a single camera crew. No reporters. No interviews. Just ordinary people celebrating extraordinary children. It was exactly how Theodore had hoped the day would feel. Emma stood beside her own painting only when guests insisted. Otherwise, she wandered from child to child, answering questions and encouraging smiles. One little boy tugged on her sleeve. "What if nobody likes mine?" Emma knelt beside him. "Do you like it?" He nodded. "A lot." "Then you've already won." The boy smiled proudly. Watching that exchange, I realized confidence had quietly replaced the fear I'd seen in her eyes only weeks before. Near the entrance, the bell chimed softly. An elderly gentleman stepped inside. He wore a faded brown jacket and carried a weathered wooden box tucked carefully beneath one arm. His silver hair was neatly combed despite the wind outside. He paused just inside the doorway, taking in the bookstore with quiet admiration. His eyes finally settled on the large framed photograph hanging above the fireplace. Daniel, still smiling in his firefighter uniform. The man's expression changed immediately. He whispered something too quietly for anyone else to hear. Then he removed his hat. I walked over. "Welcome." He smiled gently. "I'm looking for Grace Bennett." "I'm Grace." His eyes filled with emotion. "I was afraid you might have moved." "I'm Thomas Whitaker." The name meant nothing to me, until he added 4 simple words. "I served with Daniel." Everything around me seemed to pause. "You knew my husband?" He nodded. "For almost 12 years." I looked toward the photograph again. Daniel never mentioned a Thomas. He laughed softly. He usually called me Tommy. Suddenly, I remembered. Daniel had occasionally mentioned a firefighter named Tommy who loved restoring old furniture during his days off. I just hadn't connected the nickname. "You've changed." Thomas smiled. "So have the years." Emma noticed us talking and walked over. Thomas looked at her. For several seconds, he simply stared. Then he smiled through tears. "You have your father's eyes." Emma smiled politely. "And your smile." She laughed. "Everyone says that." "They're right." Thomas carefully placed the wooden box on a nearby table. "I've carried this for 4 years." I looked at it curiously. "What is it?" He rested one hand on the lid. "A promise." The bookstore suddenly felt very quiet. Even the children seemed to sense something important was happening. Thomas slowly opened the box. Inside were dozens of neatly tied envelopes. Every one bore Emma's name, written in Daniel's unmistakable handwriting. Emma gasped. I couldn't breathe. "What?" My voice trembled. What are these? Thomas carefully lifted the first bundle. Letters. Daniel started writing them after Emma was born. I stared at him. He never told me. He wasn't planning to. Thomas smiled sadly. He said. His voice caught. He hoped Emma would never need them. No one spoke. Thomas continued quietly. Firefighters see things differently. We understand that tomorrow isn't guaranteed. So Daniel began writing letters. For birthdays. For graduations. For heartbreak. For moments when he thought Emma might need advice from her dad. Tears rolled down my cheeks. Emma reached toward the letters, but stopped halfway. As though she were afraid they'd disappear. There are. Thomas counted softly. 21. Emma whispered. He wrote 21 letters? Thomas nodded. One for every important milestone he imagined. I covered my mouth. Daniel had somehow found time between overnight shifts, family dinners, and building the bookstore. To write letters for a future he feared he might never see. Thomas gently removed one envelope. Across the front, Daniel had written, To Emma, open when you begin doubting yourself. Emma's fingers trembled. Can I? I nodded through tears. Of course. She carefully unfolded the letter. Daniel's familiar handwriting filled the page. She began reading silently. Halfway through, she started crying. Not with sadness. With recognition. She handed the letter to me. Near the bottom, Daniel had written, And one day someone may try to convince you that your value depends on how you look, what you achieve, or whether you fit their idea of perfection. Every 100 years build. Exeor, your greatest beauty will always be your kindness. Error protect that, and no one will ever be able to take the best part of you. The room fell completely silent. Mrs. Harper quietly wiped away tears. Theodore lowered his head. Even strangers standing nearby were visibly moved. Emma looked at the photograph above the fireplace. Then whispered. He already knew. Thomas smiled gently. Your father understood people better than most. After the exhibition ended, guests slowly made their way home. Children proudly carried paintings to waiting cars. Parents thanked Emma for encouraging their sons and daughters. The bookstore grew peaceful once more. Thomas remained behind. He looked around thoughtfully. Daniel would have loved this place. I smiled. He built it with me. I know. Thomas reached into his jacket pocket. There's one more thing. He handed me a folded newspaper clipping. It was nearly 15 years old. The headline read, Local firefighter saves historic library from demolition. The accompanying photograph showed a much younger Daniel standing in front of a small brick library. Beside him was an elderly woman I didn't recognize. Thomas noticed my curiosity. That library belonged to Eleanor Brooks. Who is she? The woman who taught Daniel to love books. He smiled. Without her, there never would have been a Willow and Pine. I looked toward the shelves surrounding us. Toward the reading chairs Daniel had insisted on building. Toward the children who had spent the afternoon laughing inside them. His dream had begun long before we met. Thomas stood to leave. Before reaching the door, he turned back. Eleanor is 93 now. She still asks about Daniel. He smiled warmly at Emma. I think it's time she met the little girl he wrote about in every single letter. Emma looked at me with hopeful eyes. Can we go? I smiled. I think your dad would want us to. Neither of us realized that our visit to Eleanor's little cottage would uncover one final surprise Daniel had arranged years before. A surprise that would complete the promise he'd made to his daughter long before she could even read. 3 days later, we followed a winding country road lined with towering maple trees whose leaves had begun turning brilliant shades of amber and crimson. Thomas drove ahead in his old pickup truck, while Emma and I followed behind. Neither of us spoke much. Emma kept Daniel's first letter resting carefully in her lap. She had read it at least 20 times since the exhibition. Every reading revealed something new. Every sentence sounded like her father was speaking directly to her. Finally, she broke the silence. Mom? Yes? Do you think Dad really believed I'd become an artist? I smiled. He believed you could become anything. She looked out the window. I wish he could see me now. I reached over and squeezed her hand. I have a feeling. He never stopped. Emma smiled quietly. 40 minutes later, we arrived at a small white cottage surrounded by wildflowers. It wasn't grand. It wasn't expensive. But it radiated warmth. A handmade wooden sign near the garden simply read, "Welcome, friend." Thomas parked first. Before we reached the porch, the front door slowly opened. A tiny elderly woman stepped outside. Though her hair had turned completely white, her bright blue eyes still sparkled with life. "Eleanor Brooks?" I asked gently. She smiled. "You must be Grace." Then her eyes settled on Emma. For a long moment she didn't move. Finally she whispered, "Oh, Daniel." Emma looked confused. Eleanor slowly walked toward her. "I've waited many years to meet you." Without hesitation, she embraced Emma. Not tightly. Just gently enough to make a frightened heart feel safe. Emma hugged her back. It felt strangely natural. As though they'd known one another much longer than a few seconds. Inside the cottage, books covered nearly every wall. Thousands of them. Old novels. Poetry collections. Children's classics. History. Art. Every shelf overflowed with stories. Emma's eyes grew wide. "It's like another Willow and Pine." Eleanor laughed. "No." She smiled toward me. Willow and Pine became this place's dream. She motioned toward an old rocking chair. "Sit. I have something Daniel asked me to keep." My heartbeat quickened. "Another surprise?" Eleanor disappeared into the next room. When she returned, she carried a weathered leather journal tied with a faded blue ribbon. She carefully placed it into Emma's hands. "This belonged to your father." Emma looked at me. "Can I open it?" I nodded. The first page contained a date from nearly 20 years earlier. At the top, Daniel had written, "Dreams worth building." Emma slowly turned the pages. They weren't diary entries. They were ideas. Sketches. Plans. Little handwritten notes. One page showed rough drawings of bookshelves. Another contained ideas for reading programs. Another listed ways to help children who couldn't afford art supplies. Then Emma stopped. Tucked between 2 pages was a simple pencil drawing. A little girl sat beneath an enormous oak tree reading a book. Her face wasn't detailed. But beside the drawing Daniel had written, "Emma will discover that stories can heal people. I hope she helps others find theirs." Emma stared silently, then looked around the bookstore sketches again. He planned everything. I smiled through tears. Not everything. But he dreamed about it. Eleanor poured tea for everyone. She smiled warmly. Daniel visited every Sunday afternoon. I blinked. Every Sunday? For years. He repaired broken shelves, read to neighborhood children, helped lonely people choose books. She chuckled softly and insisted on making terrible tea. Emma laughed. Dad couldn't cook. No, Eleanor agreed. But he never stopped trying. The room filled with gentle laughter. For the first time since Daniel passed away, talking about him no longer felt like reopening a wound. It felt like keeping him present. Eleanor reached beneath the table and handed Emma a small carved wooden box. I made this years ago. Inside rested a polished compass. Its brass surface reflected the afternoon sunlight. Engraved on the back were simple words. Always find your way home. Emma looked puzzled. What does it mean? Eleanor smiled. When Daniel first became a firefighter, he told me he was afraid. What if one day I lose my way? So I gave him that compass. She looked lovingly at Emma. Years later, he returned it. Keep it for Emma. One day she'll need a reminder that home isn't always a place. Sometimes. Eleanor smiled through tears. Home is the people who never stop believing in you. Emma gently closed her fingers around the compass. I'll never lose it. As the afternoon passed, Eleanor showed us dozens of old photographs. Daniel reading stories to children, painting bookshelves, repairing roofs after storms, laughing with volunteers. He wasn't posing. He never knew the pictures were being taken. Every image captured simple acts of kindness. Thomas smiled. That was the real Daniel. He never cared who noticed. I found myself wondering how differently the world might look if more people measured success by lives touched instead of attention received. Just before sunset, Eleanor led us into her garden. In the center stood a young oak tree. Its branches were still small, but healthy. She handed Emma a tiny brass plaque. Blank. I've been saving this. Emma looked confused. For what? So you can decide. Decide what? What this tree should stand for. Emma thought quietly. After several moments, she smiled. I know. Using a small engraving tool Eleanor provided, Emma carefully carved 6 words into the brass. Kindness grows where hope is planted. Thomas read the words aloud. Mrs. Harper, who had joined us that afternoon, quietly wiped away a tear. Eleanor fastened the plaque beneath the tree. There. Now everyone who visits will remember. As we prepared to leave, Eleanor stopped me near the front gate. Grace. Yes? She handed me one final envelope. This one isn't from Daniel. It's from me. What is it? A promise. She smiled. Open it after you get home. That evening, after Emma had fallen asleep with the compass resting beside her bed, I finally opened Eleanor's letter. Inside was a handwritten note. At the bottom rested a legal document. I stared at it in disbelief. Eleanor had donated her entire private library. More than 6,000 rare books. To Willow and Pine, along with a small trust established years earlier to ensure that no child would ever have to pay to borrow a book or attend an art program there. Her final sentence read, Area Daniel believed one act of kindness could outlive a lifetime. I believe the same. Now it's your turn to keep that promise alive. I folded the letter carefully and looked around the quiet bookstore. The shelves, The paintings. The reading chairs. The laughter that still seemed to linger in the air. I finally understood something Daniel had known all along. A person's greatest legacy isn't what they leave behind. It's the kindness that keeps growing long after they're gone. And although none of us knew it yet, one unexpected visitor arriving the following week would give Emma the opportunity to pass that legacy on in a way none of us could have imagined. The following Tuesday began like any other. Children filled the bookstore before school, racing toward the reading corner to return books and argue over whose turn it was to borrow the Dragon series. Mrs. Harper laughed as she stamped library cards. Thomas was repairing one of the old rocking chairs. Emma sat at the art table helping a 6-year-old boy named Noah draw a lighthouse. Noah frowned at his paper. "I keep messing up." Emma smiled. "There are no mistakes." "There aren't?" "No." She turned her sketchbook toward him. Every page contained erased lines, smudges, and half-finished drawings. "My best pictures all started with something that didn't go the way I planned." Noah grinned. "Really?" "Really." He picked up his pencil again with fresh determination. I watched from behind the counter. Emma wasn't just teaching children to draw anymore. She was teaching them to believe in themselves. Around noon, the bookstore bell chimed. A woman in her early 30s stepped inside, holding the hand of a quiet little girl. The child couldn't have been older than 8. She wore a knitted hat despite the warm weather. Her shoulders remained hunched, as though she hoped no one would notice her. The woman approached me with a nervous smile. "Are you Grace Bennett?" "I am." "My name is Rachel." She looked around the bookstore. "I hope we're not interrupting." "Not at all." She gently encouraged the little girl forward. "This is my daughter, Sophie." Sophie barely whispered, "Hi." Emma noticed them immediately. Instead of walking straight over, she simply smiled from across the room. She remembered what it felt like when strangers expected too much too quickly. Sometimes kindness begins with giving someone space. Rachel lowered her voice. "I've heard wonderful things about this place. We're happy you came." She hesitated. "Sophie doesn't speak very much anymore." My expression softened. "What happened?" Rachel glanced toward her daughter. "Last year she became seriously ill. She's healthy now. But during treatment..." Rachel's voice broke slightly. "She lost all of her hair." I felt my heart tighten. "When she went back to school..." Rachel continued quietly. "Some children laughed. They called her names. They told her she looked strange." Rachel looked down. She stopped drawing. Stopped reading. Stopped smiling. Then she looked directly at me. "Someone told me about Emma. They said, if anyone could help Sophie feel brave again, it would be her." Before I could respond, Emma quietly walked over carrying 2 blank sketchbooks. She knelt beside Sophie. "I like your hat." Sophie looked down shyly. "My grandma made it. I bet she's really good at knitting." A tiny nod. Emma placed one sketchbook in Sophie's lap. "This one's yours." Sophie blinked. "For free?" "Absolutely." "But..." "I don't have anything to give you." Emma smiled. "You don't need to." She opened her own sketchbook. "You know, I used to think people only noticed what was different about me." Sophie looked up for the first time. "You did?" Emma nodded. "Then I realized something." "What?" "The people worth knowing." are the ones who notice your heart first. Sophie stared at her quietly. Then, very slowly, she reached up, pulled off her knitted hat. Soft new hair had only begun growing back. The room became completely silent. Emma didn't react with surprise. She simply smiled. "I like your haircut." Sophie laughed. A small laugh, but a real one. Rachel covered her mouth to hide her tears. Over the next hour, Emma and Sophie drew together. Not perfect pictures, just happy ones. Castles, butterflies, flying turtles, a cat wearing a firefighter's helmet. By the time Rachel announced it was time to leave, Sophie didn't want to go. "Can we come back?" Rachel looked at me hopefully. "If that's okay." I smiled. "You're always welcome." As they walked toward the door, Sophie suddenly turned around. She ran back to Emma, wrapped her arms around her, and whispered something only Emma could hear. After they left, I walked over. "What did she say?" Emma smiled softly. She said, today was the first day she forgot to be scared. That evening, Theodore arrived carrying a folder. "I've been making phone calls." "About what?" He sat down at one of the cafe tables. "I think Willow and Pine is ready for something much bigger." Mrs. Harper looked intrigued. "Bigger than free art classes?" He nodded. "I've spoken with libraries, schools, and community centers across the county." He spread several maps across the table. "I want to create a traveling program." Emma looked confused. "A traveling program?" Theodore smiled. "A mobile art and reading workshop. We'll take books, art supplies, and volunteer teachers into neighborhoods that don't have libraries." He looked directly at Emma. "And I'd like you to help design it." Emma's eyes widened. "Me?" Children understand other children better than adults ever will. He pointed towards Sophie's abandoned drawing, still resting on the table. "You proved that today." Emma looked overwhelmed. "I've never designed anything before." Theodore laughed gently. "Neither had your father. The first time he dreamed about opening a bookstore." The following Saturday, volunteers gathered inside Willow and Pine. Teachers, artists, retired librarians, college students, parents. Everyone wanted to help. Emma carefully pinned a large sheet of paper to the wall. At the top she wrote 3 simple words. "The Hope Wagon." Mrs. Harper smiled. "I like that." Thomas laughed. "It sounds like an adventure." "It should." Emma answered confidently. "If stories can travel, then hope can too." Everyone applauded. For the first time, Emma didn't blush. She simply smiled. Not because people were looking at her, but because they believed in an idea bigger than herself. Late that evening, after the volunteers had gone home, I found Emma sitting alone beneath the bookstore window. She held one of Daniel's unopened letters. "I think I'm ready." "For another one?" She nodded. Carefully, she opened the envelope. Across the front, Daniel had written, "Open when you finally understand what courage means." Emma unfolded the letter. She read silently for several minutes, then handed it to me. Near the bottom, Daniel had written, "Eric isn't being the loudest person in the room. Eddie's choosing kindness when life gives you every reason to become bitter. If one day you help someone believe in themselves again, you'll know you've become stronger than any hardship you ever faced." I looked at Emma. She was smiling through tears. "What is it?" She folded the letter carefully. "I think," she whispered. Dad knew I'd meet Sophie. Outside, the evening lights reflected softly against the bookstore windows. Inside, shelves full of stories surrounded us. And in that quiet moment, I realized something remarkable. Daniel's letters weren't simply helping Emma heal. They were quietly shaping the future of every child whose life she touched. The Hope Wagon hadn't even begun its first journey. Yet somewhere beyond our little town, a child who had never owned a single book was about to become the reason Emma's greatest adventure was only just beginning. The Hope Wagon's first trip was scheduled for the first weekend of November. For weeks, excitement buzzed through Willow and Pine like electricity. Volunteers sorted donated books into labeled boxes. Artists packed paints, pencils, markers, and sketch pads. Teachers created reading activities for different age groups. Thomas spent his evenings helping convert an old delivery van into a traveling library. By the time it was finished, the vehicle barely resembled its former self. Bright murals covered the sides. Books, stars, trees, and colorful kites stretched across the panels. Above the windshield, painted in bold blue letters, were the words, "The Hope Wagon." Emma stood staring at it in disbelief. "It's real." Theodore smiled. "It is. You actually built it." "No." He looked around at the volunteers. "We built it." The first destination was a small farming community nearly 2 hours away. The town didn't have a library. It didn't have an art center. The nearest bookstore was over 40 miles away. For many of the children living there, books were something they borrowed from schools and returned before they ever had time to love them. The Hope Wagon arrived just after sunrise. Children immediately began gathering around it. Some stared curiously. Others pointed excitedly at the colorful artwork painted across its sides. One little boy ran up and asked, "Are all those books really free?" Emma knelt beside him. "Every single one." His eyes widened. "Forever?" "Forever." The boy looked genuinely shocked, as though nobody had ever offered him something without expecting something in return. Within an hour, the community center overflowed with activity. Children filled tables with drawings. Parents joined reading circles. Volunteers helped younger students choose books. Laughter echoed through the building. Emma spent most of the morning helping children paint scenes from their favorite stories. She noticed one girl sitting alone near the back wall. Unlike everyone else, she wasn't reading, wasn't drawing, wasn't talking. She simply watched. Emma recognized that look immediately. It was the same look she'd carried after losing Daniel. The look of someone who wanted to participate but didn't know how. She quietly walked over. "Hi." The girl shrugged. Emma sat beside her. "I'm Emma." No response. "What book do you like?" The girl stared at the floor. "I don't read much." "That's okay." Another shrug. After a moment, Emma asked, "Do you draw?" The girl hesitated, then nodded once. "A little." Emma smiled. A little is how every artist starts. Nearly 20 minutes passed before the girl finally introduced herself. Her name was Chloe. She was 13. The same age Lily had recently turned. As the conversation continued, Emma learned something heartbreaking. Chloe had switched schools 3 times in 2 years because her family moved frequently for seasonal work. Every move meant new classmates, new teachers, new beginnings, and new loneliness. I stopped trying to make friends. She said it so casually, it sounded practiced. Emma looked at her carefully. Why? Because they always leave. The words lingered in the air. Emma understood. More than Chloe realized. Some losses come from distance. Others come from grief. The feeling is often the same. Emma opened her sketchbook. Can I show you something? Chloe nodded. Inside were old drawings Emma had created after Daniel passed away. Most weren't very good. Messy sketches. Half-finished ideas. Pages stained by tears. I almost threw these away. Why? Because I thought they were ugly. Chloe looked confused. They're not ugly. Emma laughed softly. Exactly. We're usually hardest on ourselves. For the first time all morning, Chloe smiled. A small smile. But real. Emma handed her a blank page. Want to draw something? Chloe hesitated. Then picked up a pencil. By lunch, she hadn't stopped. Meanwhile, the adults noticed something remarkable. Children who arrived shy and withdrawn were leaving with books tucked beneath their arms and confidence shining in their eyes. Parents repeatedly approached Theodore. We've never had anything like this. When are you coming back? Can we volunteer? Theodore simply smiled. This belongs to all of us now. As the day ended, volunteers began packing supplies. Emma walked around collecting unfinished artwork. Just before leaving, Chloe approached her. She held a folded piece of paper. I made this. Emma opened it. It showed the Hope Wagon parked beneath a giant oak tree. Children sat around it reading, laughing, and drawing together. Above the picture, Chloe had written, Erisum, some places feel like they were waiting for you. Emma stared at the drawing. Then hugged her. Thank you. Chloe smiled shyly. No. Thank you. The ride home felt different. Everyone was exhausted. Paint-stained. Hungry. Happy. Mrs. Harper had fallen asleep before they even left town. Thomas was quietly humming along with the radio. Theodore stared out the window with a satisfied smile. Emma sat beside me looking through the drawings children had given her. What are you thinking about? She looked up. Chloe. What about her? I think she reminded me of myself. I nodded. I noticed. Emma stared out the window. If someone hadn't believed in me, I don't know who I'd be right now. I squeezed her shoulder. That's why what you're doing matters. She smiled softly. Maybe. No. I corrected gently. Definitely. That night, after everyone had gone home, Emma climbed upstairs carrying another one of Daniel's letters. This envelope read, Open when you discover your purpose. She sat beside the window. Moonlight spilled across the pages as she carefully unfolded the letter. Daniel's familiar handwriting filled the paper. She read silently. Then stopped. Then read the final paragraph again. Tears slowly filled her eyes. A few minutes later, she walked downstairs holding the letter. Mom. What is it? She handed me the page. Near the bottom, Daniel had written, The day you realize your gifts aren't meant only for you. The day you use them to lift someone else higher. That's the day you'll discover why you were given them in the first place. I looked at Emma. She was smiling. Not the uncertain smile of a child searching for answers. The confident smile of someone beginning to find them. I think Dad was right. About what? She glanced toward a stack of children's drawings resting on the counter. Art was never the dream. I looked confused. What was? Emma smiled. Helping people. Outside, the town lights glowed softly in the darkness. Inside, Willow and Pine remained warm and welcoming. And although none of us knew it yet, a letter arriving the following week from a national organization would bring an opportunity far larger than our little bookstore. An opportunity that would test everything Emma had learned about courage, kindness, and leadership. The following Monday began with rain. Not the kind that ruined plans. The gentle, steady rain that made the windows of Willow and Pine glow with warmth, while customers lingered a little longer over coffee and books. Emma loved rainy mornings. She said they made the bookstore sound alive. The soft tapping against the glass reminded her of pages turning. She was arranging newly donated children's books when Theodore hurried through the front door, carefully protecting a large envelope beneath his coat. I was hoping you'd already be open. Mrs. Harper smiled. For you, we're always open. Theodore laughed before placing the envelope on the counter. It finally arrived. Emma looked up curiously. What is it? A letter. From who? The National Children's Literacy Alliance. The room fell silent. Theodore carefully slid the document from the envelope. His smile grew wider with every line he read. Finally, he looked at Emma. I think you should read this yourself. Emma accepted the letter carefully. She still became nervous whenever someone handed her important documents. Slowly, she unfolded the pages. Her eyes moved across the first paragraph, then the second. By the time she reached the final page, she looked completely speechless. I stepped beside her. What is it? She handed me the letter. The opening sentence read, After learning about the Hope Wagon initiative and reviewing testimonials from participating families, we would be honored to recognize Willow and Pine as this year's National Community Literacy Partner. Further down the page, Air is quiet. We would also like to invite Emma Bennett to become our youngest youth reading ambassador. I looked at Theodore. You nominated her? He smiled. I only introduced them to her story. They made the decision. Emma blinked several times. They picked me? They picked the young woman who reminded hundreds of children that kindness is stronger than fear. Mrs. Harper clapped her hands together. Oh my goodness! Thomas let out a low whistle. Daniel would be grinning from ear to ear. Emma stared quietly at the letter. I've never even given a speech. Theodore smiled. That's because they aren't inviting you to impress people. They're inviting you to inspire them. The invitation included one request. The Alliance was hosting its annual community conference in 3 weeks. Educators, librarians, artists, volunteers, families from across the country would attend. They wanted Emma to tell the story behind the Hope Wagon. Not the painful chapter that had first brought public attention. The hopeful one that came afterward. Emma folded the letter slowly. What if I forget what to say? Mrs. Harper laughed softly. Then speak from your heart. The heart never forgets. Over the next several days, everyone helped Emma prepare. Thomas listened as she practiced. Theodore helped organize her ideas. Mrs. Harper timed each rehearsal while pretending to be the audience. Even Noah, the little boy who loved drawing dinosaurs, offered advice. If you're nervous, he whispered very seriously, just imagine everyone wearing funny socks. Emma burst into laughter. I'll remember that. One evening, after another practice session, Emma climbed upstairs carrying another of Daniel's unopened letters. This envelope read, "Open before you face something that scares you." She sat beside the fireplace. Outside, the rain continued falling softly. Inside, only the crackling fire could be heard. She unfolded the letter. Daniel's handwriting felt as familiar as his voice. "Sweetheart, being brave doesn't mean your hands won't shake. Mine always did before difficult days. Effort real courage is walking forward anyway. RP people may remember your words. They may remember your accomplishments. But they'll never forget how you made them feel. So if you ever stand before a crowd, ever wait night, don't try to sound important. Ever way. Embersley, simply remind one person they matter. If you can do that, you've already succeeded. See." Emma smiled through quiet tears. She carefully folded the letter. "I think I know what to say now." 3 weeks passed quickly. The conference filled the city's convention center with hundreds of guests. Volunteers welcomed visitors. Children displayed artwork from programs across the country. Libraries showcased reading initiatives. Near the entrance stood the Hope Wagon. Children immediately surrounded it. Some climbed inside to browse books. Others covered a giant mural with colorful handprints. Emma looked around nervously. There are so many people. I squeezed her hand. They're just people. Thomas smiled. And every one of them loves the same thing you do. Stories. When Emma's name was announced, the room erupted into warm applause. She walked slowly toward the stage. For one brief moment, she froze. Hundreds of faces looked back at her. Her hands trembled. Then she remembered Daniel's letter. Remind one person they matter. She took a deep breath, walked to the microphone, and smiled. "Hello. My name is Emma. When I was little, I thought stories only lived inside books." Soft laughter filled the room. But I was wrong. They also live inside people. She looked toward the audience. I've met children who believed nobody saw them. I've met children who thought they weren't talented enough, or brave enough, or important enough. She paused. I used to think that about myself. The room became perfectly quiet. Emma smiled gently. Then someone believed in me. Before I believed in myself. And I realized, sometimes hope begins with one person saying, "You belong here." She looked toward the Hope Wagon displayed outside the hall. That's why we built it. Not to deliver books. To deliver belonging. Several people quietly wiped away tears. Emma finished with one final sentence. If every one of us helps just one child believe they're enough, our world becomes a much kinder place. The audience rose to its feet. Not because her speech was perfect. Because it was honest. The applause continued for nearly a full minute. Emma looked overwhelmed. She searched the crowd. Found me. Found Theodore. Found Thomas. Mrs. Harper was crying openly into a handkerchief. Emma smiled. She wasn't standing there alone. She never had been. As the conference ended, dozens of teachers and librarians approached. Many wanted to start Hope Wagons in their own towns. Others offered donations. Some simply wanted to thank Emma. Late that afternoon, Theodore walked over carrying a small plaque. He handed it to Emma. It read, "For reminding the world that kindness is a story worth sharing." Emma held it quietly. I don't think this belongs to just me. Theodore smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. She turned toward all the volunteers from Willow and Pine. This belongs to everyone. They applauded. Not for the award, but for the young woman who had learned that true leadership isn't standing in front of people. It's walking beside them. As we drove home that evening, beneath a sky glowing with sunset colors, I realized our little bookstore had become something much larger than a building. It had become proof that one act of compassion can grow into thousands more. And waiting back at Willow and Pine was one final unopened letter from Daniel. The envelope simply read, "Open when you finally understand what home really means." None of us knew it then. But those final pages would become the perfect ending to the story he had started years before. The bookstore felt unusually quiet the morning after the conference. Not because fewer people visited. If anything, more families had begun stopping by Willow and Pine than ever before. The silence came from something else. Contentment. The kind that settles over a place after months of storms have finally passed. Emma unlocked the front door before I did. She smiled as the familiar bell chimed overhead. I still love that sound. I laughed. I think your dad chose that bell because it sounded cheerful. She nodded. I think he was right. Mrs. Harper was already arranging fresh flowers near the entrance. Thomas had arrived with a toolbox, insisting one of the bookshelves squeaked too much. Theodore sat in the cafe reading, while pretending not to notice everyone else working around him. It looked less like a business. More like a family. One built by choice instead of blood. Emma climbed the stairs carrying the final unopened envelope. She had waited several days. Not because she was afraid. Because she wasn't ready for Daniel's last words. She sat beside the upstairs window where morning sunlight poured across the wooden floor. The envelope read, "Open when you finally understand what home really means." She smiled softly. I think I do now. Carefully, she unfolded the pages. Daniel's familiar handwriting filled the paper. My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, then you've already discovered something I hoped would take you many years to understand. Area home isn't built from bricks. It isn't measured by the size of a house or the number of rooms inside it. Everyone in his twice, so far out of this person, we have loved you. Home is the place where you are loved on your hardest days. It's where people celebrate your victories without becoming jealous, and carry your burdens without asking for anything in return. One day you'll meet people who aren't related to you at all. Yet they'll stand beside you more faithfully than some relatives ever could. Hold on to those people. Treasure them. Guess family isn't only something we're born into. Sometimes, it's something we build through kindness. Emma paused to wipe away tears. Then she continued reading. If Willow and Pine still stands, promise me one thing. Ever let anyone feel unwelcome there. Arrow the lonely child. Erlo, the frightened parent. Erisi, the elderly neighbor with nowhere else to spend the afternoon. Make room for them all. Era's books change lives. But people who make others feel safe change hearts forever. And sweetheart, if you've become someone who helps others believe in themselves, then you've already accomplished more than I ever dreamed. I'll always be proud of you. Arrow always. Arrow loved Dad. Emma sat quietly for several minutes after finishing. She didn't cry the way she had after reading the earlier letters. Instead, she smiled. Peacefully. As though she'd finally reached the last page of a story she'd been carrying for years. I walked upstairs. You finished? She nodded. I think Dad already knew how everything would end. I smiled. he hoped. Emma carefully placed all 21 letters back into the wooden box. They're not really endings. No? They're beginnings. That afternoon, the bookstore hosted its busiest children's reading hour ever. Families filled every chair. Several volunteers from neighboring towns had come to learn how Willow and Pine operated. Emma stood before the children holding her favorite picture book. Before she opened it, she looked around the room. Some children looked excited. Others looked nervous. One little boy sat alone in the back corner. Emma recognized the expression immediately. Without saying a word, she carried an extra chair beside him. Then she sat there instead of at the front. Within minutes, other children quietly moved closer too. By the time she began reading, everyone sat together. No one remained alone. Mrs. Harper leaned toward me and whispered, "Daniel would have noticed that." I smiled. So did Emma. Months passed. Winter arrived. Then spring. The Hope Wagon expanded into neighboring counties. Communities began creating their own versions. Libraries partnered with schools. Artists volunteered. Retired teachers returned to mentor children. The little idea born inside one independent bookstore quietly spread farther than any of us imagined. Not because of advertising. Because kindness travels faster than people think. One bright spring afternoon, Theodore gathered everyone inside Willow and Pine. "I have an announcement." Emma looked curious. "What happened?" He smiled. "I think my work here is finished." The room immediately protested. "You can't leave. We still need you." Theodore laughed. "No. You need each other." He looked around the bookstore proudly. "When I first walked through these doors, I found a little girl selling handmade bookmarks. Today, I see a community changing lives." He turned toward Emma. "I was never building this. You were." Before leaving, Theodore handed Emma a small wooden frame. Inside was one of the very first bookmarks she'd ever painted. The faded watercolor tree was slightly crooked. The colors had bled together. Across the bottom, in childish handwriting, she'd written, "Every story deserves hope." Emma laughed. "I forgot I made this." "I never did." Theodore smiled. "I bought it because I believed in the little girl who painted it." He gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Now, the whole world does." That evening, after everyone had gone home, Emma unlocked the front door one last time before closing. She looked around the quiet bookstore. The shelves. The reading chairs. The art studio. Children's drawings covering one wall. Families laughing over coffee. Everything felt exactly as Daniel had dreamed. She looked at me. "Mom?" "Yes?" "Do you think people ever really leave us?" I looked toward Daniel's photograph above the fireplace. Then around the bookstore he had imagined years before it existed. "I think love simply changes the way it stays." Emma smiled. "I like that." She reached up and switched off the final light. The bookstore settled into peaceful silence. Outside, the sign above the entrance gently swayed in the evening breeze. Willow and Pine Bookstore. Below it hung a smaller wooden plaque Emma had carved herself. Visitors often stopped to read it before walking inside. It simply said, "Everyone belongs here," and those 4 words would continue welcoming strangers long after all of us were gone. The story wasn't ending. It was becoming someone else's beginning. 5 years later, The bell above the front door of Willow and Pine still sounded exactly the same. Its cheerful chime welcomed every visitor who stepped inside, just as it had on the day Daniel first hung it above the entrance. Some things had changed. Others never needed to. The bookstore had grown. The cafe had doubled in size. The old storage room had become a permanent art studio filled with easels, shelves of paint, and hundreds of children's drawings. The Hope Wagon had become 12 Hope Wagons. They traveled across the state every week, bringing books, art supplies, and encouragement to communities that had never imagined such a program would reach them. No one could remember exactly when it stopped being one bookstore's project. It had quietly become everyone's. Emma was 17 now. Her hair had grown back, though she wore it much shorter than she had as a child. Not because she had to. Because she wanted to. She often laughed whenever someone complimented it. "It's just hair." Then she'd smile. "What matters is the person underneath." Every time she said those words, I remembered the frightened little girl who once believed she'd lost part of herself. She hadn't. She'd simply discovered where her true strength lived. One Saturday morning, Willow and Pine celebrated its 15th anniversary. Families traveled from every corner of the county. Former students returned. Children who had once attended the very first art classes now volunteered beside Emma. Some had become teachers. Some were studying illustration. One young man had recently published his first children's book. Every one of them had a story. Every story somehow led back to this little bookstore. Mrs. Harper, now well into her 70s, stood behind the cafe counter pretending she wasn't emotional. Thomas still insisted on repairing shelves that nobody else thought needed repairing. Theodore, though retired, refused to miss the celebration. He sat in his favorite reading chair, smiling at the room around him. "This," he whispered. "This is what hope looks like." Late that afternoon, a familiar voice called from the doorway. "Excuse me." Emma looked up. Standing there was a young woman carrying a sketchbook. It took Emma a second to recognize her. Then her face lit up. "Chloe?" The shy girl from the first Hope Wagon visit smiled broadly. "I wasn't sure you'd remember me." Emma laughed. "I'd never forget." They hugged like old friends. "What are you doing now?" Emma asked. Chloe held up her sketchbook proudly. "I got accepted into art school." Everyone nearby applauded. "But—" She smiled shyly. "That's not why I came." She opened the sketchbook. Inside was a beautifully illustrated children's story. The title read, "The House Where Everyone Belonged. I Wrote It." Emma slowly turned the pages. Each illustration overflowed with warmth. A traveling library. Children reading beneath an oak tree. A cozy bookstore filled with laughter. It wasn't a copy of Willow and Pine. It was inspired by it. "You inspired this," Chloe said. "I wanted another lonely child to know they aren't alone." Emma looked at her with tears in her eyes. "No," she whispered. "You did." As evening approached, Theodore gently tapped a spoon against his coffee cup. The room grew quiet. "I have one last surprise." Everyone looked toward him. He unfolded a small sheet of paper. "Several months ago, a group of former Hope Wagon children contacted me." Emma looked confused. "They asked if I would help organize something." He smiled. I happily agreed. The front doors opened. One after another. Dozens of young people walked inside. Some were in college. Others had begun careers. Teachers. Artists. Writers. firefighters, librarians. Every one of them had once been a child helped by Willow and Pine. They filled the bookstore until every chair was occupied. Then one young woman stepped forward. It was Sophie, the little girl who had once hidden beneath a knitted hat. Now she stood confidently before everyone with long, healthy hair and a bright smile. She looked at Emma. "You probably don't remember everything you told me." Emma smiled. "I remember you." Sophie nodded. "I remember every word." She took a deep breath. "When I met you, I thought people would only ever see what I'd lost. You taught me they could also see what I'd become." Tears appeared throughout the room. Sophie continued. "I became a pediatric nurse. So children who are scared the way I was never have to feel alone." The applause lasted several moments. Then another former student stood. Then another. Each shared a different story. A teacher, a counselor, a librarian, a volunteer firefighter. Different lives. The same beginning. One act of kindness. When everyone had finished speaking, Theodore walked toward Emma carrying a small wrapped package. "I've been saving this." She carefully opened it. Inside was the very first sign that had ever hung outside Willow and Pine. The paint had faded. The wood had weathered. But the words remained clear. "Everyone belongs here." Emma gently ran her fingers across the letters. Theodore smiled. "I think it's yours now." She looked surprised. "I can't take this." "You can. You've spent years proving those words weren't just a sign. They became the way you lived." Later that night, after the celebration ended and everyone had gone home, Emma and I sat on the front porch of the bookstore. The streets were quiet. The stars seemed brighter than usual. She rested her head on my shoulder the same way she had when she was little. "Mom?" "Yes?" "Do you ever wonder what Dad would say if he walked through that door tomorrow?" I smiled toward the bookstore. "I don't think he'd ask about the awards. Or the speeches. Or the hope wagons." Emma looked at me curiously. "What would he ask?" I laughed softly. "He'd probably ask if everyone had enough cookies." Emma burst into laughter. "That sounds exactly like him." We sat quietly for another moment. Then Emma looked toward the oak tree planted outside the bookstore years ago. It had grown tall and strong. Children now sat beneath its branches every afternoon, reading books and drawing pictures. The little brass plaque at its base still read, "Kindness grows where hope is planted." Emma smiled. "I think that's the ending." I shook my head gently. "No." She looked at me. "Why not?" "Because kindness doesn't have endings. It keeps moving. From one person to another. And then another." She looked through the bookstore window, where Daniel's photograph still hung above the fireplace. His smile looked exactly as it always had. Warm. Steady. Hopeful. For a moment, it almost felt as though he were still watching over every child who walked through those doors. Emma stood and unlocked the bookstore one last time that evening. The familiar bell rang softly. Somewhere outside, a little boy looked up from the sidewalk. "Mom," he asked, pointing toward the open door. "Can we go inside?" His mother smiled. "Of course." They stepped into Willow and Pine together. Emma welcomed them with the same words she had spoken thousands of times before. "Hi. We're so glad you're here." And just like that, a brand new story began.